Good afternoon and welcome everybody. My name is Gary Sloper with Macronet Services, and we're hosting this webinar today with Palo Alto Cloudgenix. Super happy to be with you. It's something that's near and dear to our heart. It's SASE is not a journey, it's a destination. And I'm joined here with my esteemed colleague and partner, Ryan Williams, who is the Senior Director of North American Channels here for Palo Alto Cloudgenix. So welcome today, Ryan. Thanks for joining.
Gary, really appreciate you having us. We really appreciate your partnership. And even though, to your point, everyone's getting a little bit of webinar fatigue these days, we are hopefully going to make this a ton of fun because I didn't script this, so this could be wild. I like it.
Yeah, I like it. No, let's dig in. I mean, there's a lot going on in the market. I think a lot of customers are asking questions around SASE. And this is not just customers that are in existing SD-WAN environments. These are ones that are still moving off of a DMVPN and various other environments such as MPLS. So I think it's a really important topic. And kind of what we want to talk today from a background perspective is just the focus around your current MPLS and how do you do that migration? How do you start that process? And then really what the industry overview is focused on around SASE. So not just what we're talking about today, and Ryan's going to talk quite a bit about what the analysts are saying, and then really this complete shift that has to happen, especially as you start looking at security and proximity to not just cloud services, IaaS, but the various SaaS tools that you really need to utilize within a globally distributed WAN, and then that critical execution planning from a cloud perspective, and then what we'd like to do is actually have a brief demo with Rich Miller from Palo Alto as well to kind of walk through the platform and just really have just a quick dialogue around how easy it is to execute this type of environment, which you're going to love what Cloudgenix has to offer. The other thing too is we realize that everybody is really webinar fatigued, so our goal is to move through this very quickly. Myself included. I understand that everybody's trying to get mind share, but we realize that in terms of where customers are moving, they are moving much faster than they ever have. They've had to go from this traditional MPLS environment and move to a broad distributed SD-WAN topology. It provides some unique advantages, being able to utilize different access methods, but if you think about a lot of topologies today, that traditional MPLS offering has a complete, fast reroute core backbone. So if you think about those LSPs that are nailed up, from a switching perspective, it's super fast, super secure, and that was really great when we built this, 10 plus years ago. When you started thinking about QoS and some of those, low latency queues to do voice and video, but that really has started to change, and it didn't mean that a lot of organizations couldn't connect into the cloud based on their MPLS. Obviously, a lot of organizations are doing that, but you don't get all of the benefits, I would say, in this new globally distributed SD-WAN environment. And so now that cloud has arrived, and we know more and more organizations, you can even look at a lot of the analyst reports, are starting to add some of those workloads to the cloud, but also taking some of those non-cloud native, those MS-DOS applications that a high school intern wrote several years ago or decades ago are now getting rewritten into this multi-cloud environment. But what's interesting is that the companies that we talk to on a daily basis, they know that they have some sort of infrastructure, right? They manage and monitor and maintain it on a daily basis. They have some sort of MPLS or DMVPN or even an existing SD-WAN environment. The challenge that they're finding as they start talking about things like SASE is how do they, implement that within a multi-cloud strategy? So not just my Amazon environment, but my Amazon environment plus other SaaS applications. Or as I'm now starting to take my lift and shift from my database environment, maybe I've now added Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. So I have that obviously connectivity that I have to do between AWS and Oracle. But how do I take all of these users, and now you add COVID as part of that, and take that remote branch perspective, which is now, our homes in a lot of instances, and start to have customers and be able to integrate within that multi-cloud strategy. And it's not something that you can just go pick up a manual or just go read a blog and say, okay, this is it. And what you're going to hear from the team here today at Cloudgenix is, the components of really starting to build towards that destination. And and being well in advance of that now, because the decisions that are being made today are essentially those that you have to live with at least for the next 36 months or longer. So what the challenge that we see here often at Macronet Services is they know that they have this problem, and it's not a complete problem. Like they've put some band-aids around, they've driven some access directly into some of these cloud environments. But then when you start talking about security, when you start talking about the ability to turn up various tunnels into certain facilities, logically across the cloud-based security becomes that key component. And so solving that software-defined ability between, say, this Amazon and Oracle environment is very easy to do. But if you have that legacy architecture and you're starting to look at the critical components of SD-WAN now, even if you have an existing environment, what are you going to do and kind of focus on that checklist moving forward? So the things that we always recommend as we start talking about SASE today is there's really what I would say 5 key areas to think about. So obviously planning your transformation strategy seems pretty straightforward, but you'd be surprised that it's not just looking at the technology, but it's also the total cost of ownership and the ROI that you receive back. So while you may pay something slightly higher with one particular solution, is it really worth it for the long haul? So if you look at a platform like we're going to talk about today, the advantage is that a lot of that destination is already being built. So instead of just looking at a complete price point saying this SD-WAN versus that SD-WAN, that is not the right strategy, because from an executive standpoint, those decisions need to be made not just based on the price, but the functionality and the ease of use from a topology standpoint moving forward. There's no need to have a team of architects in your staff to completely bang away on the CLI on a daily basis. Having the ability to utilize some of the UI components in an environment like we're going to talk about today really saves time, and that's where you have to quantify. I kind of look at the old ROI models we used to do from a co-location standpoint when that was brand new. This is no different as you start to migrate to SASE. Classifying your site types, I think, is very, very important, and having that thoughtful classification. So as we think about, not just is this, a primary site that's really important, it's really what is being delivered to these sites, what applications need to connect to. So we talked about those different SaaS environments. Do I need to connect into Salesforce? Do I need to connect into ServiceNow? Or maybe I need, cloud-based security with Zscaler or Cloudflare. I need those plugins, those ability to hit those additional cloud services. So when we think of cloud, it's either IaaS or SaaS in that standpoint, and that's where you really have to kind of classify those sites. Some sites may not need as many of those requirements, especially as you get to remote locations. Designing that end-to-end architecture. This is one of the things that I think is critically important. You can go and build the most robust environment, and everyone that does work with us and myself know that I'm a stickler when it comes to diversity. So as you start building that high availability environment, that local access diversity is key. You may think you have diversity with 2 different entrances coming in, but if they're all coming back to the same central office, or they're not really in a true diverse fabric environment to connect into those CSPs, you're really limiting yourself based on everything that's here. It's like putting, diesel fuel into an unleaded car. It may run for a little bit, but it will certainly break down and clog up the engine. The implementation piece is very, very important. I think you have some options. You can fully manage an environment like this as yourself, but as you're going to see today with the proliferation of SASE coming out, having that co-managed option makes sense. Like having shared root access, the ability to have somebody to help you manage something at 2 o'clock in the morning is not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't mean that you can't handle this, but there's still those do-it-yourselfers, and we work with a lot of companies like that today, and I think that's what you're going to see, that the ease of kind of the building blocks here with Cloud Blades and the App Fabric component here with Cloudgenix. It's very important that you do understand this if you are going to do a do-it-yourself model. And then procuring your services. So obviously it's pretty easy. Sign a contract and install. No, you really need to understand all of the components that go into this environment. If you're coming off of that existing DMVPN, that has a huge impact on how your traffic is moving today, and no different from an MPLS standpoint. So really making sure you have a skilled design engineering process and then a proof of concept. What I love seeing is then when you can put in a POV and look at what that inline environment looks like today, based on what this new topology tomorrow will benefit you by, it's really powerful. And I think these are the advantages from an SD-WAN perspective that we get to take advantage of today that we didn't have the ability to do with MPLS, because you had to deploy MPLS circuits first. Now being able to, kind of bring your own access, it allows you to do some things that you couldn't do before. And so having that proof of concept plan, building the KPIs, and then overall governing this entire environment is super important, especially as you move into this new SASE world. So what I'd like to do is actually turn this over to Ryan to kind of go through a little bit more, especially as we look to go into this, SASE destination. And I think if you look at what Gartner's saying and some of the other analysts out there, it's still kind of new territory. But sometimes you have to think about where some of the leaders are heading and some of the questions. And so one of the reasons why we enjoy working with Cloudgenix and Ryan and his team is that they take a very pragmatic approach to this. But now that they're bolting on to an organization like Palo Alto and this recent acquisition, we've all kind of been in that M&A aspect. But if you really start to look at the building blocks of where they're headed, it's really interesting and intriguing, especially someone like myself as an engineer, to kind of watch the tech, but then see the challenges that they're solving. So Ryan, maybe you can kind of walk us through kind of what this next gen looks like from your organization's perspective and how this is going to bolt into Palo Alto.
Yeah, no doubt. And Gary, thank you for, number one, again, the opportunity to join you. Number two, what an awesome overview. Couldn't agree more with a lot of what you said. That was my first time seeing some of your methodology personally, so that was really fun for me. I actually took a few notes myself. I'm a big note taker, and I love some of the points that you hit that are going to resonate with some of the things we described. So I'll jump right in here just quickly by way of introduction. As Gary mentioned, my name is Ryan Williams. I was the Senior Director of North American Channel Sales for Cloudgenix, now part of the Palo Alto Networks family. So first comment is we've been part of the Palo Alto Networks family since April, and it has been the wildest ride of my career, Gary. It has been a ton of fun. We are joining an absolutely world-class organization. We have been welcomed with open arms. And for all of you on the call that have maybe gone through or had a vendor go through an acquisition in the past, I want to make you feel really comfortable for a couple of reasons. Number one, Palo Alto Networks has a history of integrating technologies really, really well. They buy companies, not products, right? And I think that's a really important distinction. They have made us feel incredible. They've woven us into the fabric of the organization really well. I couldn't be any happier. I'm extremely proud to work for this organization, and I found an incredible level of acumen and talent from a technical and kind of go-to-market perspective. So that's been an awesome transition for us. So the message is bigger, better, faster, stronger, and we feel that way. And hopefully you can hear that in my voice. It's a very, very genuine thing. So I'll jump right in and talk a little bit about the industry's first next generation SD-WAN fabric. So Gary, I hit a couple of high points first. I think you've seen my pitch before, so I'll throw my standard couple of slides in there, which is everyone on the call or viewing this later, I got to answer, why do you care? And what happens if I don't, right? Those are the first couple of slides you just got to get out there. So why do you care? When I joined Cloudgenix 3 years ago, I was, I think, the 12th sales employee. It was very early stage in the SD-WAN market. We were left of this innovator column, if you're familiar with the reverse bell curve, and only the trendiest and forwardest thinking enterprises out there were buying SD-WAN technology. We took a really unique approach to market. If you look at all of our competitors, they chose to be routers fundamentally, and we'll talk a lot about that today. We chose to be the industry's first session and flow-based architecture and to go to market at the core of the network for enterprise providers as session and flow-based technology rather than packet and protocol-based, and that's a big distinction. And we chose to attack the biggest and baddest networks on the planet. We went to the Cisco who's who, the VMware who's who. We went after the biggest companies on earth and said, if we can win here, then we can win everywhere. A lot of our competitors chose to sell wholesale. We did not. We chose to go direct via the partner community to the biggest companies on earth and show that our product could perform in the hardest networks on earth, could scale in all of those environments. Because candidly, Gary, to your introduction, those were the companies that really had the full multi-cloud world 3.5, 4 years ago when I joined the company, and not everyone was there yet. now to your point, especially with COVID, even before COVID, but now with COVID especially, transformation isn't optional, right? We have transformed. It doesn't matter. You can sit in a hole if you're an enterprise organization and choose to try to resist this. The reality is your customers, your end users accessing applications are going to struggle if you don't shift the fabric of your organization to be away from a hub spoke architecture that, again, to your point in the introduction, worked well when the applications lived in our four walls as an organization. Now they don't, and our users don't live in our four walls anymore. So the apps are gone, they're cloud delivered, they live in a multi-cloud and SaaS world, and the users consume them in ever-changing fashion, mobilely, even when we're not in COVID world, they were consuming it mobilely. Now they're certainly, to your point, even potentially in a branch office environment, being a full-time mobile user. So not only do we have performance issues, but again, to your introduction, we have security and compliance and governance issues that are associated with our databases and our applications and our users. Just candidly, the perimeter has exploded, right? And that's the best way we can think about it. So what we've seen is a further acceleration of this adoption model. We are clearly across the chasm. All enterprises in mid-market organizations are there, and SMBs are adopting this daily. The other thing I want to answer is no scariness here. The products have been fully integrated for 18 months, so I want to be crystal clear. This is not a wait and see from an integration perspective with Palo Alto Networks and Cloudgenix. The products exist. They're on the truck today. We have deployed thousands of sites globally across major enterprise organizations. I can't, since we're recording this, I can't name some of those customers publicly, but the biggest manufacturer of consumer goods in the world is using this product, the SASE product today. One of the largest technology vendors on earth is using this one. Two of the largest retailers on earth is using this. So all Fortune 100 companies that have deployed this globally. But I wanted to include this slide. I won't read this to anybody, but from 2015 to now, we've been working very tightly with Palo Alto Networks because anyone who's been a network practitioner or a security practitioner, Gary, you're an engineer, you can probably attest to this. For the last 10 years, we've been saying, okay, these things are gonna come together, right? And we were kind of flirting with it. They were kind of slowly coming together, but we knew that these technologies needed to be fundamentally integrated into a single fabric. And that's what SASE to us really represents. And now that's here, right? And I think Palo Alto Networks buying Cloudgenix is certainly a validation of that market. Some of the largest enterprises on earth use our technology today. These customers are public references, so within our community, we can talk about these. And they have really interesting use cases. So I would suggest, Gary, if anyone wants a real deep dive into any of these technologies, then or any of these customers or reference checks or any of those things, then please reach out to Gary and team, and he can set that up with a proper reference call. The one on the left, Autodesk, has a much bigger story than what it is, but this is kind of the easy story. Tons more capacity, in this case 6x the capacity and 82% overall cost savings, right? The other two I think are more relevant to Gary's introduction, which is not just how do I deploy these new networks and be agile and be effective, but how do I day two manage it, right? And in the case of both of these customers, these are co-managed environments. They're not fully managed. They are co-managed by the customer. But it's a lot easier when you have a 3-person IT team that's stressed for time and running down alarms around security alarms or networking alarms. It's a lot easier to support your 300, 400, 500 sites when a company like Cloudgenix can come in and help you reduce the actual ticket load by 99%, right? Then that becomes really tangible. We can actually manage that. We can actually view that. And then if we look at kind of the day two ROI impact that Gary was referring to, I'll tell you right now, I'll save everyone on this call and that views this later, the suspense, we will not be the least expensive company that you talk to. But what you'll see is a new Forrester report that's coming out shortly, where one of the analysts drills down deep across some of our enterprise customers and saw that there's a massive cost savings in day two ROI. For Columbia Sportswear, it was every 100 sites, John Spiegel, their CIO, saved $550,000. That's a real metric. He went public with that and said, this is what it is. Fortune 500 auto distributor. If you look it up, there's not a lot of them out there, but Fortune 500 auto distributor, one of the biggest ones in the world, just came public with us and said, hey, we saw a 10x performance increase at a significant cost savings over time. They estimate that they're going to save $3.3 million in a 36-month term, right? But they're going to also see a 10x performance increase. So how does that look? So the last thing I'll point you to, the why work with Cloudgenix, is Gartner Peer Insights. So this is public information. Feel free to jump onto Gartner, grab this information. This is the good, the bad, and the ugly. This is our customers and our competitors being ranked by customers, saying, these are verified by Gartner reviews that say, does this company execute against what they sold me or not? Period. End of story. And there are some in there, like one from a big global manufacturer that we sold very early on, that said, look, I love these guys. But man, they killed me early on. They didn't have global distribution figured out. Fortunately, we do now. But that review's in there, and it shows that these are transparent. So please, I would love everyone to go there, because candidly, our customers recommend us overwhelmingly to their customer base. So please feel free to check out Gartner Peer Insights. So I'll pause there, Gary. Any questions on kind of the what's in it for me? Any risk associated with the integration? Did I answer those okay before I jump into what you guys really want to hear, the technology?
Yeah, no, I think that was great. I think you're spot on that, kind of what I was, ironically, I wasn't leading the horse to water when I was talking about the ROI piece, that you can't just look at, a box to box or, an application or an application. You have to look at the entire picture. And for those of us that have been doing this for a long time, we realize that sometimes that can be difficult to pass the red face test with a CFO, or even at the CIO level, who owns that piece of the P&L from an OpEx perspective. But when you start quantifying things like you were mentioning, reducing the ticket volume so your team can actually go do the things that they were hired to go do in your organization, look at for other efficiencies, having the ability to deploy quickly in those types of environments, I think that's where customers really struggle with at times, because especially in the telecommunications world, they have been beaten so much to drop cost. And where does the OpEx go? It goes to cloud. And so now the advantage that I think can be brought back home is that you're enabling cloud. It's not I'm enabling just voice, or I'm not just enabling data transmission. I am enabling everything else that the organization has to rely on, and it's all cloud-based. And so therefore, yeah, if you are marginally a little bit higher just on a peer-to-peer perspective, the other advantages that you take from an ROI standpoint are massive, and that's where organizations really have to be myopic, and that's where we help them kind of communicate that, because we're dealing with these types of designs, similar to you, on a daily basis. For many organizations, that lift and shift, or that refresh, happens every 3 to 4 years, and so they're not in that same cadence. So that's why it's really important to really drive into the tech. And I love how you had the Gartner Peer Insights. It's one of my favorite sites because it's very unbiased and just says, hey, we're just dispensing what customers say. Nobody's paid to do this. That's great.
That's right. They validate it, right? It's like my brother-in-law can't go on and fill out a review for me and tell me Cloudgenix is great, right? I mean, it's validated reviews, and it's the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I love that. It's the best reference in the world. Just last point there on ROI, we will help Gary and team side by side. We will all help you build an ROI. And then the other way to solve that is talk to other customers, right? Our customers are thrilled with us. I will go on record right now on this recording and say, Cloudgenix doesn't get replaced, right? We are the next generation fabric. Palo Alto Networks is the next generation application-defined fabric, and we have examples of taking out pretty much every competitor out there. And our customers love us, right? They're fanatical for us, and we're very, very proud of that. So we're happy to get some of our customers on the horn and just answer some of those tough questions, because the CFO, even though you can reduce trouble ticket volume, might say, well, they don't cost me anything. Tickets don't cost me anything. That's debatable. ServiceNow has a license per ticket cost, just FYI for anybody out there that's looking to make that argument. Okay, so let's get into the technology, the fun stuff, the stuff me and Gary love to beat our heads against the wall and talk about these things till we're blue in the face. This is the fun part. So where do the legacy SD-WAN solutions fall short, right? Fundamentally, what problems were we trying to solve that other people, we don't believe, can close the gap with us, right? And here's really in 3 buckets where they are. First one is user experience, specifically around application and application performance, right? Reason being, 7 years ago when we came to market, we chose to be the first session and flow-based architecture. That was a radical shift in technology. Everyone else is a router. So I challenge everyone on this call, I've challenged Gary in the past, if they're not a router, tell me how. Because the underlying architecture they have is router-centric, and that's okay. I'm not saying it's the worst thing in the world. My argument is that it's a marginal increase from the past. that it's a marginal increase from that original 1993 Cisco 2500 series router, and that we have a roadmap from there to where some of our competitors are now, where Cloudgenix is a radical shift. And the analogy I like to use here is Tesla Prius, right? The Prius is definitely a better technology. Yes, it has marginal advantages. Yes, you can get more out of every tank, but you haven't dropped the combustion engine, right? And in our world, we're the Tesla. We completely redefined this. We went to the whiteboard and came up with something different. And I asked one of our CTO, Aaron Edwards, in a private conversation once, he said, Aaron, tell me about that, right? Because I kind of envisioned the startup garage, right? Gary, the movie theater, pizza boxes on the table, sign on the door says no sales reps allowed, and a bunch of tech guys sitting around. I don't know, I'm not allowed to go in those rooms, I'm the sales guy, but they're sitting around with a whiteboard, right? And Aaron goes, yeah, it was kind of like that, which was funny. He kind of validated he was not so movie theater, but it was kind of like that. And I said, well, how did you guys come to this? Let's go completely disrupt this thing. He goes, well, fundamentally, someone handed somebody else in the room, I don't remember who it was, they handed him a marker and said, if you're going to define the next 20 years in technology, are you really going to draw another router on the board? And that was like really eye-opening for everybody in the room, right? And I think it's really powerful to think about that, because that underlying architectural decision that was made 7 years ago was really far in advance, right? We thought about some things and hoped that the market would work out. We had a pretty good feeling, an educated guess, that cloud will become more prevalent and become more available, and that applications were going to be further, SaaS delivered, and no one had any idea that everyone would go completely mobile for at least some period of time, right? So that certainly helps our argument. But the idea, the concepts, the decisions were made 7 years ago, and that really fundamentally, that gap is getting wider and wider between us and our competitors, right? Because we can continue to build on that, and this is not a roadmap problem for our competitors. It's a fundamental architectural rudimentary issue that they just can't solve for with R&D and with finance, right? Second thing is that architecture provides is this really unique model to become autonomous, to build the network in a very, kind of auto magic way, to use kind of a cheesy term, right? But to build an autonomous network and to leverage different workflows and fundamentally understand applications in a different way and truly deliver a session and flow-based policy, build policy at layer 7 that makes layer 3 decisions, not the other way around, right? And everyone else is really doing it in the inverse way because that's the only thing they can measure. And then lastly, simplify, remove cost and complexity. So all those things that we talked about earlier, but this kind of has two components, not just in terms of, deployment, but also how do I simplify my platform and how do I deliver both from a deployment perspective and a day 2 perspective? How do I leverage DevOps and automation and deliver services to the branch, right, Gary? We're not in the days of delivering services in a blade router. We're not adding another blade to the router anymore, right? We're saying you want to go consume a cloud app or a multi-cloud app or a SaaS app at branch ABC, New York City, and you have 150 users, right? I want to give you a workflow in real time, whereas IT, I can go in and in a very agile manner, I can deploy that application and get effective performance and security and compliance for all my users. And that's really hard to do when you're in, lines of ACL code that are in the tens of thousands to deploy a branch. And we all know that, right? We all know that that's a problem. What we're trying to do is show everyone that there's an alternative out there, right? So those are kind of the fundamental problems that we're solving. So then, acquisition takes place. What does next generation WAN look like? So again, fully session and flow-based architecture, right? So we can make layer 3 routing decisions based on layer 7 policy architecture and layer 7 application performance. We are using machine learning to build autonomous and self-healing networks that get smarter and smarter, right? This is where that 99% of trouble ticket reduction comes in, because we're saying proactively, right, in that case with CapTrust with John, we're sending automatic notifications to ServiceNow saying, hey, this is network related, issue a ticket to the network provider. Or hey, this is Salesforce related. I'm not picking on Salesforce, but go, issue a ticket to Salesforce or 365, right? That's where the problem lives. We've identified it. And then there's an API call into their help desk ticketing software, and then it creates the ticket. Now, if you can remove all that manual intervention, all that troubleshooting, and that physical ticket creation, you can automate that process. It's extremely powerful, and there's a tremendous amount of ROI associated with that, right? And then delivering services in a very effective way. We really like calling this the cloud delivered branch, or delivering cloud scale economics to the branch. So think about all the branch infrastructure that you need: security, operations, collaboration. Gary, you live in the UCaaS world, contact center world, right? All these things are services that we need to deliver. All this branch infra that we need to deliver, we can do so in a very agile and secure way, and do so very, very quickly via API rather than a manual service creation. So that's really, really powerful, right? So I'll pause there, Gary, and then I'm going to drill down on kind of each one of those concepts. So what are your thoughts so far?
Yeah, I think it's great. I second the piece on the collaboration side. Brendan Sheehan and our group, who runs the UCaaS and cloud contact center and communications side of our business, deals with this on a daily basis, and it's shifted from the boardroom right now to a work remote environment. It's not just going to Best Buy, if you can even find one, a camera. It's actually putting in the right technology to overlay based on, again, having another endpoint and utilizing that environment to connect into your overall SD-WAN, so you have the posture and the ability to secure it, but also to prioritize that traffic for those types of environments. So yes, again, it sounds simple, but when you're having to manage this around 100 plus nodes from a corporate standpoint, and then you add several thousand or even several hundred employees that are now remote, or specific individuals, that becomes very difficult. So I think that's very important point that a lot of users really need to understand, that it's it may sound simple based on a blog that you're reading, or if you've never really deployed it, but the amount of time takes,
or a picture on the screen like I'm showing. Yeah, this looks really easy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
These decisions were made 7 years ago, and I'll even say, you said 100 branches. I'll say 42 applications on average per branch. Now we got 4,200 things that we have to consider. That's before we add any security context, right? So as you start, and then what if those applications are, some of them, as you know, in this slide demonstrates, those applications may live, if it's a big database and architecture, may live in the customer's data center. Okay, so now we got to account for that. Half of them are cloud delivered, right? SaaS delivered, so true public cloud SaaS. So do we need to go through the data center, or can I take those straight to internet? I don't know. Can I build policy around that? If you're Cloudgenix, you can, right? And then what about half of those that are in maybe an infrastructure as a service type environment, that IaaS suite that you were referring to? So the problem is that there's just a tremendous amount of complexity, even in the smaller environments, right? So the idea here is, it's funny, when I started, the tagline we used was networks without networking. I don't know if I'll get in trouble for bringing back old school marketing, but we had shirts, Gary. I literally have a Ghostbuster shirt that says #no routers, right? We used to walk around and just preach it, because it was like, we can get away from this. Great example. I love telling the story. I know I'm digressing a little, but I think it's important. So we have one of the largest banks in the world, 5,500 global branch retail locations, 2 circuits per branch, wanted to remove 1 MPLS node. So the first use case was, if I can get rid of one of my 2 MPLS connections at 5,500 branch locations, average circuit cost of $500 per month, right? These numbers rattle off pretty quickly. Everybody do the math. 500 times 50, 500 times 3 years, $33 million savings per year, 99 million over 3 years. Big savings, right? Makes a lot of sense, clearly justifies the project. Now, it's a bank, it's a retail bank. So I have all kinds of retail compliance concerns, and then I have banking and financial concerns all coupled together. So can I do this and leave MPLS was a big challenge. Yes, we solved for that because we're deployed at all 5,500 of those branch retail locations today. But the most powerful part of that entire story, right, was kind of that automation story, and was getting this scale deployment architecture going very, very quickly, and then wrapping a secure context around it, right? So it's not just a cost argument, it's a security and deployment architecture argument that allowed for scale and secure access at the branch. So it's a really powerful one and a whole lot of fun. So I'll dive into each one of those kind of 3 key concepts. So the first one was application defined, because you're going to hear a lot of marketing out there. Everyone who's listening to this, let me caution you, you hear a lot of application aware. Some of our competitors may even say application defined. Let's get in a cage match. Someone put me, I want to be in the knife fight in the phone booth on that one, Gary, so put me on a panel with any of them and let me challenge that contention. We're truly application defined. We're built around layer 7. Everyone else is built as a router. They use the packet and the measurements associated with the physical layer of the network as the underlying baseline for performance. And then they make educated guesses on how applications should behave based on those underlying network characteristics. I'm not even saying that that's wrong. I'm saying it's not what we do. We do that, plus we start at the top down. We look at how does the application behave, and we put a whole context around that, around the session. So that could be MOS scores in the voice world or specific codecs, because GoToMeetings video codec is different than Zoom's or Ring Central meetings, right? So some of them are more tolerant to latency, as an example, one of these physical measurements. Some of them are more tolerant to latency than others. You have to measure each one differently and build different baselines for performance. We do that algorithmically, we do that in real time. And then we make decisions based on not just the performance of the circuits, right, but also things like server response times. Is my host responding to my request, right? Did we complete the three-way handshake? If so, is the information flowing effectively? Tell me how you do that if the only thing you're measuring is the packet. Tell me. And if you can tell me how you do that, I'd be amazed. Some would argue, well, that's not how we do it. What we do is we bookend the solution, and then we monitor the connection and we flood packets across the network and we ensure delivery. Okay, if you think that's the right approach, put us side by side with them and let's see how it shakes out. Because we'll argue all day, twice on Sunday, that we've got a better architecture there, right? So I said autonomous, Gary. How does autonomous work? So these are the three concerns around every application, right? Priority, security, and compliance. So we build policy on a per application basis, meaning every application on the network, and that is known to Cloudgenix or unknown to Cloudgenix, doesn't make any difference. So if an organization has a custom app, which by the way, of those 42 applications, we find that typically 30–40% of them are custom. Even if it's something like SAP, is every SAP environment the same? Of course not, right? So they function differently. So custom apps make no difference to us because we're session-based. So we build application layer policy, and then we characterize the performance of those applications against both the application hosts and the users, as well as the WAN characteristics associated with the app. So allowed paths, because maybe we have LTE in the environment, in a retail environment. We don't want every app to use LTE because it's super expensive. So we want to use just critical apps, right? Then we build and map application policies against each application and apply user context across that, right? And then here's the beautiful part. Enter Palo Alto Networks, right? And the amazing partnership and now same company story that we have. We put a pervasive security policy around all of these application policies. So now we can enforce dynamic security policy on a per application basis across any WAN link, right? And apply zero trust user context across the whole gamut. It's incredible, right? No one's doing that. This is real SASE. And then here, that architecture plays in those little 3 dots that I threw in there. Gary, you know how important those are. Some of the users on this call may know how important those are. Not everybody gets it, so I'll call it out. That API feedback loop is really hard to do. And it's really important because we take context on a per customer basis and feed all of this back into the application policy, and then we get better and faster and stronger over time inside our customer environments. And we allow them to fine-tune policy effectively and build real context around performance for their users. Because here's the deal. It doesn't matter whether we produce a graph that says everything's hunky-dory. No one cares. All they care about is, does it work? The CIO, the CEO, they don't care if they go home and they try to log into Salesforce and it works great, and then they come back into the office in 2 months when we're all allowed to do that and it doesn't work at all. They don't care why. They just want it to work, right? So the ability to just show strong user experience and build and measure your network's reliability and performance. Give yourself a scorecard if you're on IT around application performance, and be amazed at the business outcomes you receive, right? And then lastly, I'll just give this a very high level overview. Deliver services from anywhere, any type, to any branch, to any remote mobile user, and do so through a complete security context. And you got something special, right? You're going to unlock a lot of economic, benefits. You're going to unlock a tremendous amount of performance benefits, and you're going to drastically reduce and mitigate risk, right? And a lot of people will use all those buzzwords. Gary, you know me, I'm not technology word salad guy, right? I'm not just throwing out buzzwords. These are tangible, quantifiable metrics that we deliver for our customers. So I wanted to throw this in here. When I say cloud scale economics, this is really what I mean. We've built this ecosystem of what we call cloud blades. Gary was referring to them earlier. Any multi-cloud world, if you look at the 4 or the 5 clouds across the top, if you're a customer, these are the 5 things you care about every day at the branch, right? At all of your branch locations, these are the 5 things you care about. If we were in a data center world, I'd throw in storage up there, right, Gary? That'd be the kind of cloud number 6. But in our world, in the branch world, which is where Cloudgenix lives, these are the 5 kind of key areas we care about. This is branch infra, and we deliver across, we throw some names up there just so everyone's aware. These are native applications that we're built to today, that we've stood up, you know, a Cloudblade service. It's an infrastructure delivery service that's free for our customers. It's part of our product that just allows us incredible topology to deploy, you know, at scale. This plays huge roles, right? So we have a customer, a German customer. They're a huge manufacturing and steel company. They're one of the biggest ones in the world, global Fortune 50, and they were doing a massive Azure migration, and it was really hard. And we came in and said, okay, you're going to Azure private WAN, public WAN, right? Azure services, and you're building and shifting a lot of your production and network workload into Azure. And they're saying, yeah, but we can't tell what's going on, and we're seeing performance issues. And we say, great, integrate Cloudgenix into that Azure. Use our Azure Cloud Blade, and we can tell you end to end within the Azure public WAN world, within the private WAN world, within all of the consumption resources. We can say, here's how applications are behaving. Here's how users are connecting, and here's your security and performance risks. And it was incredibly powerful. And then, you know, I've got a couple other slides that I'm just going to quickly flip through because the talk track is done, Gary. So I'll pause there and let you answer any questions. Left 10 minutes for Rich to do a, I always tell him he gets 15 and then I only leave him 10, which is unfortunate. So,
no, I think this is really important, especially in the built-in kind of components within Cloud Blades. I mean, I've seen a couple questions come in around voice and collaboration. So the fact that you're natively built into some of the more common aspects of, you know, Microsoft and Zoom and WebEx and some others, I think that's really important, especially in an age right now, having that ability versus just a traditional SD-WAN environment, which could just be a, you know, an x86 box that is just providing some cursory connectivity, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It depends on the topology. But I think
I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying it can't work, and it's definitely low cost. We would say keep your firewall in place from Palo Alto Networks and add a subscription for SD-WAN, right? That would be my counter to that. But the reality is that what you mentioned could be a solution. What we find is that the market is continuing to make that solution less relevant, much like a hub-spoke MPLS environment. It was great. It's not quite as great anymore. Is there still use cases? Certainly,
sure.
Right? Certainly use cases.
Yeah, and I think the ability to add that remote, you know, work from home user, now I kind of call the work branch, because it's kind of a combination of both, to be able to securely add that into the WAN, but also take advantage of, you know, the ability that in your case, you know, Cloudgenix can provide some of those real-time statistics. Is it my broadband connection, or is it really where the broadband connection is dropping the peer off to connect into my collaboration environment or into my IaaS-based service or cloud SaaS service that I have? It may not necessarily be where I'm receiving it. It's just, but being able to have that deeper forensics, I think, also allows that the network team to do something a little bit differently. And I think that's what also can be powerful coming out of this.
I literally have nothing to add to that. I completely agree with you. I think what we see and what really matters is customer outcomes. Yeah. How does this impact the business, right? What is the business outcome? The reality is IT cannot be boxes, protocols, and commodity circuits anymore. It can't. You can't survive. I just want to stress that. As an organization, you can't survive. And if you do survive, you're definitely not going to thrive. You know, as workloads shift and as the world changes, you have to be agile. You have to be ever aware and secure. And you need to build and construct policy around performance and user experience for your users, or you will fail. And we've just seen it time and time again.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So maybe what we can do, yeah, is now pass this over to Rich. Are you still on? Did hopefully we didn't bore you to death.
Not at all, not at all. Somebody as dynamic as Ryan, you're not going to get bored to death by any means.
I always take all of Rich's time though. I'm so selfish with Rich's time. So Rich, you got 10 minutes, brother. You want to give us the quickie, the quick version here?
Ryan helps me practice my speed talk.
Guilty.
All right.
So,
You guys able to see my screen here?
Awesome,
yeah, absolutely. Looks great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Diving in and looking at this from what we call legacy or generation 1 SD-WAN into what we are now as the next generation SD-WAN. Not beating up the competition by any means. The competition played its role. Cloudgenix has done such a leap forward in the technology, very similar to going from frame relay to MPLS, going from the old POTS lines to the SIP lines. It's such a leap forward. Some people, as Ryan indicated at the beginning, have been pausing to accept it, and people are now rapidly coming on board. So what you see on your screen here is what the legacy or generation 1 SD-WAN providers do, our competition. Is the link up or down, red or green? If it is up, great. Is there packet loss, latency, or jitter? Okay, there is. Let's move it over to the other link. That's where their story ends. Now, they will use this against us, saying that this is a better route of doing SD-WAN. We disagree, obviously, but we also do this. So this is where our story begins. We are also giving you these same metrics. This is built into our algorithm. But again, this is where their story ends. Quick scenario, and I know these numbers are not realistic, so those that watch this video later, the engineers, please do not send me emails blaming me on it. I'm using them for simplicity. But quick scenario would be, path A has 10 milliseconds of latency on it. Great. They look at path B, there's no latency, they move everything over to path B. Next generation SD-WAN, Cloudgenix, what we're looking is through that router, through the firewall, to that server. So we're seeing that there's 10 milliseconds at the transport. There's an additional 5 milliseconds infused from the server that path A has connected to. We then look at path B, again, 0 at the transport, but now there's 25 milliseconds of latency at that server. Path A is ultimately the faster path, so we'll route around and go back to that path A. Now, based on the size of the enterprise, this gets multiplied, and it's easy to build a ROI around. But more important than that is my second scenario. Path A is the same, 10 and 5, 15 end-to-end. Path B, great, no latency at the transport, but wait a minute. I can't see the server. The firewall's got translation issues. The server's got CPU utilization issues. My competition simply can't see that. And that's where the flow and session-based SD-WAN comes into play. Now, let me show you exactly how we do that. So first, let's look at that second scenario. Again, I feel like that's the most important or impactful when you're sitting in front of a prospect. Let me quantify what you're seeing on the screen here. In blue is what's called an init success, or successful initiation of a flow or session. We measure this by the 3-way handshake, TCP handshake. Then, in green, you're seeing a transmit success. So I don't actually see the data, but I am seeing that a request went to the server, and then the server responded and put payload on the pipe. I'm not, again, looking at that data. We call this metadata. Again, from a security compliance perspective, that's what helped us win some of the large financial industries that we have won. And then what you see in the orange and red are the inverse of each. Now I'm looking at live actionable data. So I'm not looking at post-mortem data. I'm looking at real-time analytics here, actionable. So let me grab a application. You know, we talked about Office 365 earlier. Let's go ahead and look at them. Looking at that, obviously Bill doesn't just have one server sitting in his basement. This is my demo environment. I'm hitting 14 different prefixes, servers out there. But I want you to focus on this middle column, failed connections. As I scroll down, I see I had 10 here at 4126.532, another 10 at 4126.596. These are problems. Again, my competition would never know that I was not able to connect there. So the end users would see that hourglass until they shut it down or retry to launch that application. Again, I'm going to route around this. My competition would fail fast. Why would you want to fail fast? I'd much rather succeed at all costs. Now let's look at that first scenario that I talked about. Let me zoom out here to the last 30 days. Makes it look a little bit nicer. Again, this is my DVR. I'm looking at a homegrown application, MPLS. So yes, I can do homegrown analytics, applications analytics, just like any enterprise. So on the bottom, you see in blue NTT, that's network transmit time. That is network congestion. In green is round trip time. How long did that three-way handshake take to happen throughout end-to-end throughout that network? And then in orange is SRT, server response time. How long did the server take to respond to the request that was sent to it? Now, again, this is real-time traffic, but let me give you a scenario. Scenario is it's Black Friday. Yep.
Rich, real quick before you do that, did you just shift from 1 month to 1 hour? Can you kind of walk everybody through what you just did there from a time frame perspective?
Yep, that's exactly where I'm going. So with this being my DVR, I went from a 30-day view. I can go all the way out to a 90-day view. I can zoom into the week, the day, or the hour, and I can look at it by the minute and hyper zoom in, which is where I'm about to go. I can also rewind through back to an hour when I'm in the 1 hour mode. And then I can also rewind back to a day and go day by day. Again, this is real-time analytics. But again, giving you the scenario of it's Black Friday. On Black Friday, you have a line of customers out the door. Why? Because the credit card machine's taking 7, 12, 15 seconds to process a request. We all know what happens. The store manager refers it to the help desk refers it to the carrier waits 2 days and responds with NTF, or no trouble found, good to the DMARC. Well, if I'm hyper zoom in, as Ryan just indicated, I can see I had a huge spike in server response time. We call this our mean time to innocence. I didn't need to take the time to refer this out to the help desk and then to the carrier. I already know that this is not a carrier or transporter, any of my peripherals within my network, my LAN-WAN problem. I know that this is a server problem. I can see it's this server that had 5 unreachable events and 2 transaction events. Now, we will alert you on all of this. And if you have any of the ITIL type applications like ServiceNow, which we do have APIs into, a ticket will be generated for you. And we can adjust those thresholds. I would love to go deeper with this with you later, but for sake of time, I'm going through this a little bit quickly. I'm going to zoom back out to the 30-day view, and then I'm going to be using my DVR tool. I'm going to go back about 2 weeks because I didn't want to go all the way out to that 90-day view, and I'm going to find a problem within the network. All right, I see a little blip right here, and I'm going to quantify what exactly you're seeing. So let me hyper zoom into this. Now, we are currently looking at the New York branch, and for this specific application, market. Top line is my end user overall experience. Green, obviously good. Red, being unreachable, down. Then, based on my policies, these are my 3 options that I can traverse that traffic across. In yellow, or lime green based on your monitor, partially good. That means they had some, the NIT failures, transmit failures, server response time issues, round trip time issues, or possibly latency, packet loss, or jitter. So if the scenario here would be, I'm trying, Gary's sitting out in New York, and he's trying to get to Marketo across the Internet VPN. It's fine, so we leave it there. But Ryan's trying to get out to the Internet VPN, and he has some of those NIT failures, round trip time problems. So we go ahead and seamlessly, with no human interaction, move that over to the private WAN. Now, when we do that, I do not abandon the Internet VPN for Ryan. I'm going to put some synthetic data into the Internet VPN until it goes green for that specific application. If you guys have met Ryan, you know he's hyper productive. So he's probably in Salesforce.com or Office 365 at the exact same time. Those applications try to go across the Internet VPN, and they don't have a problem, so we go ahead and leave them there. What I'm trying to impress upon you is we are looking at this by user, by application, by transport. We get that deep, that granular within the product set.
So that,
now,
hey, Rich, real quick, that's really impactful, because we had a question come in around application performance for real-time video and voice. So are you saying, based on what could be going, could you drill down into that latency, jitter, for example. Oh, great. Yeah, because I think that's something really important, especially now where we're all kind of, remote in some fashion, not as much at the office. I think that's really impactful too, because, the first thing, kind of Ryan's earlier point, I don't care, just fix the problem. And the perception may not be the reality. The phone system's not working. Well, it's not the phone system. It could be something else in line to get to that call or that video transmission.
Or it could be the phone
Absolutely.
system. I think
Or
we're
it
all
could be
just
the
sick
phone
of
system.
not knowing, right? We just want
Right.
to know. Everyone accepts that there's going to be some problems. We just want, as IT and as networking professionals, we just want to fix them. We want
Right.
to get it done. No one doesn't want to fix the problem, right? Everyone wants to fix the problem. Just can't find
Yep.
it half the time, right?
Yeah, it's really just driving that MTTR.
No doubt.
Exactly. And out of the sake of for time, I'm going to show you two last things quickly. So if I am looking at real-time traffic, I'm looking at RTP here for my New York location. I can see that I had a call in my demo environment, switch from one transport to a different transport, and then back again. I can tell why. Was it because of jitter? No. I can see that it was based on packet loss. Now, when that packet loss increased, I seamlessly moved it over to the other overlay. And I also monitor the MOS score. Now, these are pre-configured or predefined thresholds, but you can adjust those if you have some off the beaten path locations. I also wanted to show you what we call our flow browser, all the data that we're actually seeing. Now, when you go into a flow browser, often you have as this renders here, it takes just a moment, you'll have a customer say, I'm having a problem with an application, they're a home user. Well, if I can see that the out-of-order packets or the retransmit packets were from the client to the server or server to client, I can quantify if it was the home user's Wi-Fi or broadband network. And often we have those type of trouble calls. So let me grab a traffic here. Again, I want to impress upon you what we see. Source and destination IP and port. We also see what QoS settings, what path policy settings we have. Where did the traffic originate from? Within corporate, or was it VPN or external? Was it on the guest Wi-Fi, corporate Wi-Fi? What the endpoint? I'm pointing this toward my Prisma access, as Ryan indicated earlier. Yes, we're integrated directly with Prisma. It's actually north of 20 months now that they had purchased us, so that this relationship has been in place. And I'm going to show you that in just a moment. Lastly, again, as I indicated, I can see what my average network transmit time, round trip time, server response time, my maximum and minimum as well throughout my network. I can see out of order packets and which direction those were, as well as any retransmits that I would have. Again, helping the help desk identify if this truly was a local issue or if it was a issue within the coming from the server.
Rich, you did that.
Lastly, are you still?
You did that at record time, man. That was awesome.
The last thing I want to impress upon you quickly, I have less than 30 seconds here. Ryan already showed you this screen as far as CloudBlaze. These are APIs into best of breeds. What I want to impress upon you is end-to-end. We are the only SD-WAN solution that is end-to-end active-active. Now, my competition can certainly do load balancing from one ISP to the other, but they cannot move a flow from one overlay or underlay to another one. And I want to be clear, end-to-end, active-active. We have two competitors that also market active-active with their environment, but it is not because they're not tracking the performance at layer 7. They're not able to detect and remediate those brownouts nor switch over at layer 7. One is a carrier, so on their backbone, they're active-active, and the other one is a gateway solution. And their gateway solution, meaning their data's got to go to their gateway and get forwarded on. They're active-active between gateways. Cloudgenix is the only SD-WAN solution that is active-active end-to-end. And that's what I have for you.
Oh, that was impressive. And thank you for going through that quickly. I mean, obviously we could probably spend hours going through the demo, but I think what's important to note, and I think Ryan, you mentioned this earlier on in kind of the broadcast, that this isn't just pounding away at the CLI. So you as an engineer probably appreciate the ability that you can just go in and visualize some of the tooling here and not have to, kind of look at your show run and do other things just from a CLI perspective.
Reg probably misses it. He probably misses punching lines of code. No, I'm kidding. But we, I look at Gary, one of the big financial customer I shared with you earlier. They went from over 200,000 lines of ACL down to 18 application policies.
Wow.
I mean, Come on. Like, if you really
Yeah.
think about that contextually, right? Hundreds of thousands, which is believable. Anybody who's on this call that's managed networks before, 5,500 dual node MPLS branches in a heavy context retail environment can easily eat a couple 100,000 lines of ACO.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, this is great. I really appreciate the time that you all spent with us today, Ryan and Rich. And I also want to thank Aubrey Malcolm as well for putting this together. We answered a bunch of questions. Hopefully some folks took, just some nuggets away, and if anyone wants to see further demos, we can certainly spin that up or just have just an overall design discussion. Think about that first pillar that we talked about, just planning. It's so critical right now, and you want to make that right investment. So if there's anything that we can do, both Ryan and myself would be happy to help, and look forward to seeing you on future casts. And thanks again, Team Cloudgenix Palo Alto. We really appreciate your partnership and looking forward to continue working with you.
It was a blast. I enjoy this stuff. Hopefully it comes through that way, because this is a lot of fun for me, and I'm super proud to be part of this family. So Gary, thank you for your partnership, and anyone on the call, as Gary stated, we are side by side with him. Our engineers will help you go through any planning discussions and help you get great outcomes. We'd love to help.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of the day.